I want to give you guys my 5 best bets for week 9 of the 2024 college football season. We're coming off a 3-2 week. We're looking to go 5-0, and we're going to start off with our lock of the week. Miami as a 21-point favorite at home against their arch nemesis, the Florida State Seminoles. Florida State, you can say probably they are the worst team and all of college football, man. This is not a good team. Their defense is okay, but their offense, they got no good quarterback play. Their offensive line can't block nobody. And the wide receivers, they can't catch to save their lives. This is just an all-around bad team. I know that Miami has had a couple of close games these last couple of weeks. You nearly lost to Virginia Tech. You almost lost. You had to come from behind to beat Cal, and you got into a little bit of a shootout with Louisville last week. But Florida State, I would be really surprised if Florida State was able to hang around and keep this a 10-point game going into the fourth quarter against Miami, man, because Miami should dog walk these boys, and this probably could be the most one-sided game that we've seen between these two rivals, man. Florida State, they're bad, and Miami should just step on these boys like a cockroach. It shouldn't be a good game, man. Miami should dog walk these boys. This should be like 48-0 at halftime. Next up, I love SMU as a 12-point favorite against Duke. Duke's defense is pretty good, but they don't have a good offense. And the only reason they beat Florida State was because they were able to come away with 3 turnovers, which was able to help them put points up on the board. But when you force Duke's offense to have to drive the length of the field, to put up points, sustain drives, they can't do that consistently. And Malik Murphy, he hasn't been as good as what the stats may indicate. He's been really inaccurate. You know, he takes pretty good care of the football. He's not going to turn it over that much, but he hasn't used his legs that much. So it kind of has made Duke's offense a little bit one-dimensional. They also don't have good receivers. SMU is one of the best teams in the ACC. They are well coached by Rhett Lashlee. And fun fact, Rhett Lashlee was Manny Diaz's offensive coordinator when he was the head coach at Miami. So you got a guy that's pretty familiar with Manny Diaz's scheme. He knows them pretty well, and SMU is just an all-around better team. They figured out their offense. They also are playing really well on the defensive end as well. I love them to dog walk Duke and cover that 12-point spread. I'm taking Kentucky as a 2.5-point favorite against Auburn. I know that this is a game that probably is going to make a lot of you bettors nervous because Auburn and Kentucky, they haven't really looked too hot this year. But I love Kentucky in this spot only because they do have one of the most talented defenses in the SEC this year. De'Arne Walker, the star defensive tackle, he probably is going to be a first-round pick in next year's draft. They got a lot of depth on that defensive line, a lot of guys that can get after the quarterback. And Brock Vandagriff, he hasn't played that well this year. They probably should make a quarterback change, but he ain't worse than anybody that Auburn has put at quarterback this year. Anybody Auburn has put at QB this year, they've been a massive disaster. They have turnovers galore every game. They're one of the worst teams at taking care of the football in all of college football. Kentucky, yeah, Brock Vandagriff may have a turnover here and there, but you can trust them to take care of the football more than you can trust Auburn. And with Auburn's turnover problems, I love Kentucky to be able to capitalize off them. And also with how good that defense is, they should be able to hold Auburn to probably only 14 points or less. So I love Kentucky to be able to win because they do have the better team. They do have a lot of talent up front on the line of scrimmage. I'm taking Syracuse as a 6-point underdog against Pitt. Now, Pitt, they've been one of the biggest surprises in all of college football this year, and so far, they have been unbeatable, it looks like. But they have had a couple of close calls. You know, they had a close win against Cincinnati. Their secondary is not that good. They do surrender a lot of passing yards, and that's why I love Syracuse to cover, because Syracuse with Kyle McCord at quarterback, this dude has been one of the best QBs in all of college football statistically this year, and This team pretty much has a Mike Leach air raid feel to it. They don't really run the football a lot. They just want to throw the football 50, 60 times a game. They do have good enough receivers to do that. And I don't think Pitt is deep enough in their secondary to be able to slow down Kyle McCord and that Syracuse offense. And another thing is that Syracuse also doesn't really have to worry about Kyle McCord turning the football over that much. So you got a team that they can spread the football out. They can throw it 50, 60 times with a quarterback that makes a lot of good decisions. I still like Pitt to win because I do believe that Pitt is the better team overall, and I don't trust Syracuse defensively, but I expect this to be a close game that's going to be high scoring. If you're somebody that likes to bet on the point totals, I probably would take the over in this one. This is probably a game that probably ends up being in the high 30s, maybe the 40s. I don't expect to see a lot of stops in this one. And lastly, I love Illinois as a 21.5 point road underdog against Oregon. Oregon is going to win this game, but Illinois has showed that anytime they played against any of the best teams on their schedule, they play way better in those matchups than they do against any of the other teams. And they only lost 21-7 to Penn State. That was a very close game for the majority of it until Penn State pulled away in the fourth. And they also were pretty dominant against Michigan. And anytime Illinois plays in these big-time games, they always get up for them. Their defense plays well. You got Brett Bielema, who has a lot of familiarity with these kinds of matchups, these kinds of hostile road environments. And this is a little bit of a letdown spot for Oregon. You know, they crashed Purdue last week, coming off that big win over Ohio State. This could be one of those letdown spots for Oregon. And it also is going to be a game that shows us if Oregon is an elite team or not, because every team has a day where, you know, they kind of struggle. And we saw Texas lose at home to Georgia. We very well could see Oregon struggle at home against Illinois, which is why I love them to cover that 21.5 point spread. So these are my 5 best bets for week 9 of the college football season. If you parlay these, let me know how much success you have with these. If you bet these singles, let me know how they do for you. But we currently are like 19-12 on the season, so we're over 50%. And we've been hot these last couple of weeks outside of what happened in week 8, I believe, was our worst week of the year, or week 7. But these are our 5 best bets. Leave your thoughts in the comment section down below.